Welcome to my stream. It's a bit overdue. I had to make dinner, so I'm a bit late. But here I am, ready to make some crystal peaks for today's stream. Let's see. So, first of all, I haven't really made a lot of these environmental pieces in a long time, so it's good to get back to it and make something. And I was like, why not make it on stream? Especially to celebrate like the great amount of support I've had on my YouTube channel lately. I'm really grateful for that, so for that reason I'm going to start a stream making another indie game environmental drawing. These usually take up to a week for me to draw, so don't expect me to finish everything today on the stream. I'm gonna make a beginning. I have not streamed making a beginning on this kind of drawing before, so I'm curious to see how it goes on stream. But above all, it's a good moment to have fun, I think. So let's get on it. So first of all, yeah, let me start with telling a little bit about the canvas I use. I usually start with the industry pronounce it app, but it's probably called AAP 64 palette. It's one of my favorite palettes to use on Sprite, but you can use a lot of different palettes. And honestly, there are some great palettes like Rosy 42, but I find that AAP 64 provides a broad range of colors to start with, and it's really nice to work with, so I like using it. And it doesn't mean that I'll stick to using all of these colors. I just nice colors to start with, and what I usually do is I adjust these colors to fit my preferences. So there's some colors in there I'll never use, or I create in between colors for like a dark gray and this. So that's kind of how I work, which is great, I hope. Other than that, what I usually try to do is I try to make one layer, which I called Grayscale. And I got this tip from a friend of mine called Flash Kirby. He's also a really great artist. And what you do is you create a new layer and you set the color mode to the layer blending mode you set to color, and then I just put this one on like, yeah, well, that's just for the visual, so it doesn't really matter. But what you do then is when you've made this color layer, you pick a brush that's exactly white. Well, what you call it? Like the maximum value that you can get on a brush, like completely white. And then what I do is you pick up the paint bucket tool and you fill your entire canvas with that white. What this does is that, for example, I hide this and let me get something done. This is not the final drawing, but let's just say we create like a start, and I'm just gonna do this very roughly. So I'm just gonna pick up this huge brush, like completely salmon color, and then I pick up some other colors and I make them a little bit more grayscale, smaller size. Just to demonstrate how it works. So for example, I make this weird little cave thingy. Make some rock sides to the side and whatever. Well, if let's say I have this, for example, and I might get out of screen when I use my drawing tablet, so I will move this one a little bit more to this side, so I hopefully won't go off screen when I use my drawing tablet. So what I can use this grayscale layer for is I can check the value, the contrast ratio between each of the environmental layers. And using this, I can really determine, for example, if I use like a yellowish toned color, or green, yellow, whatever. And let's say I make this really greeny thing. It's really ugly. It's not really the color you really want to use in this context, but just for demonstrative purposes. I take a yellowish color. Dark yellows are so ugly. And I draw this. Let's say I want to draw something in the depth right here. Whatever. For example, this might be moss or something, and the moss would be like this. Maybe some blue moss as well, somewhat lighter. Whatever. Not beautiful, but just to demonstrate. So if I use this, I can see how the light is relative to how the light value is relative for each colors between each of the different colors, if that makes sense. So for example, this really bright moss is way brighter than, like, let's say the other moss down there. So if I make it slightly darker, then it should match the other color moss better, and they're still lighter than, for example, the cave layer behind it. So you can even pick up those and make those slightly darker, and then you pick up the grayscale again, and you can see, yeah, now they are like remotely the same color. So it's really useful to see to make sure that colors are interpreted the same way. But enough of that. I'm going to delete everything I made here because this is not the crystal peaks. And it's funny because this is like a stream where I go more of the foundational ways how I draw these environment drawings. So what I try to do first is make a rough sketch, and I look at some examples of the given environment. So I usually just pick up Google. It's probably not something I can stream right away, but let me see if I can get like a screen capture on something on. And then I can see show my progress of how I do that stuff. So where is it? I was window capture. So I put this one on my, yeah, I am using Microsoft Edge, which is quite something. So what I try to do is I try to go through like screenshots of the game or the environment I'm trying to draw. In this case it could be the Hollow Knight Crystal Peaks which I'm trying to draw, so I look for references. I use this program called PureRef, which unfortunately is not being shared right now. I'll probably just turn on my entire screen, so that, or like my entire display capture. It should be this display. Yeah. So I use this program called PureRef. It's really nice way to stack up your references, and I can just leave this on my other window and I can drag images that I consider good for the sense of drawing this environment to it. So I look at all these pictures and I especially look towards the kinds of pictures that really focus on like the scenery that I want to draw. So I haven't prepared anything for this stream in the sense that because I ran a poll and some of the results came up and I was like, well, there were a lot of people that want me to draw Hollow Knight, but also were a lot of people that wanted me to draw something original, and there was also the previous poll running in my Discord where a lot of people wanted me to draw the Crystal Peaks biome from Hollow Knight. So I was like, yeah, fine, I'll do something from Hollow Knight, but I also pick up something that there was really a lot of demand for previously. And I also feel like it's nice a nice looking environment that I can get a lot of practice out of. Because previously I made, I can show you what I made previously in the sense for Hollow Knight. Let's see, just gotta pick up the, and it's funny because like this was the first sketch I did for my City of Tears drawing in Hollow Knight. And then let me. So it's really basic, but it gets the feel done. So, and after that, I went through a lot of stages, and I have to see where's the first Ace or the last Ace file. Like Ace is the file extension for Ace Sprite. So I believe this is the last file I made. So, as you can see, in comparison to the first one, like some background colors are more subdued and they blend better. And of course, like these details I had going straight away, but I polished a lot of the details in the environment. So let me get some of this music going. I'm gonna have to write music for the right scene. This one. So in this picture I did do a lot of layers. At this background layer, and then a layer on top of that, and a layer on top of that, and they all go slightly more detailed as the pictures come back to the front. So we start out with like, and that's really depending on the kind of background that you're trying to make, because this one has kind of a bright background, and I try to work towards the color I have in the back. That's usually the color that the light color is in this scene. And I went for kind of a blue color because the entire city is covered in rain. And rain is kind of light because it reflects all the light in the environment. But at the same time, it also has got this kind of blue vibe. And same thing with all the buildings in this city, they also have this kind of blue vibe. But I tried to go for a slightly warmer greenish kind of blue vibe in the background, and that's because I thought I went for the mushroom biome in the game. And I don't know, that one is more green in color, so I kind of went for that color in the background. And as you can see, I really tried to bring more, as further you came close, get a lot more colors, get a lot more detail, and I made this last year, so I'm looking forward to see what I can get done this year. Yeah. So first I'm gonna look at some pictures which I think are interesting for my scene. I'm looking mostly at screenshots from the game because those are the most representative of the environment. But I could also look at some fan art as well. That's great, because this is an interesting fan art. But when I look at making an environment like this, I try to figure out a way to make it appear as closely to the game as. So how would I formulate that? I try to nail the vibe of the game. So when you look at Hollow Knight, for example, and I try to do that in my City of Tears work as well, the foreground has really dark colors, and that's really great because you can really create a lot of depth by using dark colors in the front, and then have more subdued colors, light colors in the middle, and then let it slightly fade away in the end. So that's something I try to do as well. So if I look at this painting, let's see if I can get some more. Because if I just randomize this playlist, they're gonna be intense boss music, and that's not something I can really vibe on, at least at the moment, when I'm trying to have a chill stream. So when we look at the colors we saw previously, I think it's important to, and I go back to like the screenshot right now, And I pick up like one that's really representative of what I want to make. I think this one is good-ish. It looks like a bit of like fake, but it captures the vibe very well. Like this is also a nice one that captures the vibe. And that's the sad thing about this environment. It doesn't have like an iconic setting. I mean, there are some iconic places when you look at the map. There's like this temple where you collect. I believe you meet one of the. Like there's when you go through a long gap, there's this temple and you go inside of there, but I can't remember what is in there. It's been so long. Crystal Mount. So and I look at the map. So it's mostly a mine. But this is a good example. So what you can see is you have really dark colors in the front. Right there. You have really dark colors. And then you have this cave in front of it, usually, which uses slightly more subdued colors, like still quite kind of fancy. And then you have these really light purpley colors in the background, and they eventually fade to something more purple. We can see that in a lot of these screenshots actually, like this one as well. We have the night here. Now with the foreground we have this really dark, almost black color, and then we have this grayscale pink that eventually moves towards more pink in the background, and then when these caves open up, there's a huge crystal area, and there's even some of these crystals in the foreground, and then eventually purple. So as far as colors go, sketch. I think these colors are nice, but they're not exactly what I need. So first of all, I try to use a black, like a dark color that's not exactly black. Like this could be a nice foreground color. Like the things that would say be right in front of your scene. So let me use my brush. Put it on size 12. So, for example, we might have like a shaft right here in front of the scene, and there's maybe some rocks that point towards this direction. It's not how it's gonna look, but like this is the color I want to use in front. Then what I usually do is make a layer behind that, and I go back to the screenshot and I look at it, because that's nice. Doesn't like looking at screenshots. So I look back at the screenshot of the game and I look, okay, so the next color range we're gonna use is a little bit more blue-ish in tone, so dark blue. And I try to make sure that my palette matches this. So this is a really pink color, so I'm trying to make this more blue, so that the color transition matches the. And I should not do this on this layer. Should do it on this layer. Then I go for a slightly darker blue, so I pick up this and I go slightly towards the pink, because the further I go back, the more pink it becomes. And this one should not be here. I know even if this is a sketch, I still like to work with multiple layers, just to get the feel of things and get the feel of the colors. So again, I'm not drawing the actual scene now. I am trying to figure out whether I pick colors that work. But it could work. Like it could even create like an opening down here, and I try to work very iteratively. So I draw something and I'm like, what if there's a huge chasm down here? So I focus more on having a chasm. However you pronounce that, I don't know. I've never spoke that word before in my entire life. So I go back to layer 1, or like it's my sketch layer, and I try to match some of that feel. So in this case, I would be having a huge open area in the middle of the environment. Then obviously there's something called the, well, not obviously. There's this thing called the rule of thirds. Some of you might have heard about it before. What it entails is like you draw a few lines, like let's say roughly 1/3 here, roughly 1/3 here, roughly 1/3. Well, it's more like here and here. If I do this, I can figure out where do I put my interesting object, where the player would, or like the viewer would be drawn to. I usually try to put the interesting object in one of those 4 circles. My back is killing me. So and I know it's kind of black, so let me figure out something how you can actually see the white color I use here. So I put this down here. Let's say I will use this one and I go towards a nice pink. Oh, not really a nice pink. Like this or something like that. We draw this on the background. There we go. It's not beautiful, but it gets the idea done. So when we have the rule of thirds, we have a few places where we could potentially place our interesting focal points. Let's say in the crystal temple there, or like the crystal peaks, there's let me take a little drink. No. Well, it's gonna make. I tend to make a lot of layers. So it is like the background, and I make a new layer, which is the mid objects. Usually, I try to put them in an extra folder, or like put different layers in the same folder, so I keep things organized. But for mid objects, I try to pick something dark, but also have like it's really close to the crystal, so maybe there's like a ramp in the distance, but it's also kind of like this, a little bit darker like this. And I figure out that maybe there's like different kind of aisles in the environment, a little bit further in the distance. And I work kind of layer to layer. And like the foreground what I have right now, it's very rough. It doesn't represent what it's gonna look like eventually, but it kind of gets the perspective. Like this might look like a big black element, but I can eventually turn it into like a mine shaft, because this environment uses a lot of mine shafts and elevator, and I can make like let's say an elevator that goes into the distance here, and maybe there's like different layers of environments in distance, so they all have like hook up to the same level of detail, and that makes it interesting, because that might make me want to put like the shaft down here, but I don't think I want to. I think I want the shaft to be closer to this spot, and then this slightly darker. Again, I'm just the easiest way for me to brainstorm how I'm gonna draw something is just experiment and see how I'm gonna get it over, like how I want to approach certain things. So in this case, I want to focus on an element specifically. So I open the map because, for the god of me, I cannot remember. Like, there's this crystallized mound, because I want to stay true to the original material. And this is kind of a difficult. Because here's the thing where you can get your super crystal dash, I believe. And I want to remember if there was a house there, because I thought it was like one of the most memorable moments of that area, where you could get this ability where you could dash really quickly through the area. But this is also interesting, actually. Like, I think I really like this idea. Like, have the scene be somewhat in the middle of a mine shaft. So again, I'm just spitballing still. And I know I said I would use pure ref, but when I'm streaming, I'm having so many windows open, so that there's not really a good reason to use that software. It's really useful when I have like an entire screen to go for it and not my stream preview. So that's kind of how my stream makes my work difficult in a way, but it's also funny to experiment. So I'm gonna go back to my window capture. Gonna turn off my desktop capture. Don't worry, it's not your screen that's not working, it's me figuring out how to get back the focus back on just a sprite. So there we go. Otherwise you get all the kind of shit that I see all the time, which is not ideal. Like right now I have a picture in front of me of how I want things to look like, want certain things to look like. So I'm not usually trying to take over the source material exactly. So, and as you can see right back at my City of Tears first drawing, rough. This was done later, by the way, this detail. First was rough. So as you can see here, right now it's rough, and you should not be afraid if your first drawings of an area look rough, because that's just a matter of the process. Is you start with rough details and eventually you work towards creating something more or less, well, complicated. So I try to just get some of the elements in there, and again I'm drawing them rough just to get the feel of the scenery. And then you get more front elements. Drawn rough again. Drawing front elements like this, they give the scene depth. And you can draw them and you feel like, well, they don't match my composition. Well, that's why I use these lines, so that I can use the rule of thirds to create an interesting composition. I'm gonna make this one slightly more, hide it away a little bit, so that's just slightly there. Again, when I do this, it might not feel good. It might look weird, and then you're like, you know what, I don't like these rocks being here. And then you can remove some of those rocks and focus only on the background elements of the rocks. And that's something I like about this style of pixel art, is I can repeat elements I see in the front and I can convert them to background elements as well, to keep a consistency in my work, or like keep a consistency in the way the scenery looks. So I'm really trying to nail the mineshaft vibe. And then you think about what kind of, and I'm not working on animations yet, but I can imagine that at some point I would make an animation that makes like cards go up here and then go down here. Because that would be interesting to look at visually. And it's also quite close to like the rule element, so. And I'm like looking at the picture, and I'm working at kind of zoomed out, because I want pixel art to look good at this detail level, but also at this detail. Well, this detail level. So it's always nice to look at your picture in different ways and see whether it vibes nicely, matches the vibe you're going for. And I'm just looking at the scenery, and I'm like, well, wouldn't it be nice if I make another layer, and I call this front crystals. Again, I'm just trying to figure things out and experiment, and I'm like, yeah, well, they're front crystals, so they're like this, but they're brighter and they're more warm because they're in the front. And I draw like, maybe I want them to be in front of the front layer because they're in the front. I like to put big elements on the front, and he said, would you kindly go in front of there? And again, I'm keeping it rough, keeping it very, very rough, just to experiment. Let's put a huge ass crystal over here. Let's see how it goes. Then I make it point out. Like, well, I also have to really think about the environment that I'm gonna make. Like, what's the purpose of this area? Why does this area exist, and what's the, well, what do people do in this area? Because the more I know about the interactions people have with this area, the more I can create a little sense of world building that goes along with this area. So, for example, I do this, and then I go back to the crystal. And again, I'm not doing excessive detailing. But I'm just getting the vibes. Oh. Just getting the general vibe of the area. Crystals, and have like this split service thing going on. Think about I'm just thinking about crystal shapes. Like, how do crystals work? Again, it's interesting, but it's not like centered. But I still think even like rules are meant to be broken. And it might sound stupid, but I think if you stick to the rules, you have to understand the rules, But if you want to make an interesting drawing, you also have to know like when. Because I think it's kind of boring if every drawing ends up looking the same way. But yeah, understanding the rules is important. Like this is very far. Like you have to understand. Like if I put a lot of interesting elements right here, they're distracting when you want your focus to be on here. So one thing I could do to make the front crystals well work is to make them point towards the direction where I feel like interesting stuff is going on. So for example, they're really big right now, so I could maybe rescale them slightly, and then you rotate them slightly and make them point slightly more towards the direction where I want interesting things to be. Again, this might not be the right composition and it might be really distracting, but if I put something interesting down here, I want these elements to look towards that. Does that make sense? Again, I haven't decided what exactly I'm gonna put there. And maybe this crystal is the interesting element right here if I put it at this place, and then I can use the other elements in the front. Like this could be slightly bigger, and make the other front elements point towards this crystal, and you can create weird shapes, but it does help to convey the general idea of, hey, there's something interesting over there, go look at it. And maybe like the cave encloses right here. And I go back to the mid layers and I draw on top of here as well, because this area is not endless. It's a cave and the cave is enclosed, and you want to make sure people understand that. But you still want to keep, like, I go back to this layer, I use my brush, go back to this front back layer. And I'd like to open like these kind of openings to this scene. Just to give it a sense of depth. And I go back to the mid objects layer and I draw in front of it. Like I want things to feel grand. And even if they don't feel great, I still want them to feel good. I should have probably done that when I removed these arrows. I am so good. I'm glad that these arrows are not on a wrong, they are on a wrong layer. But look at that, I completely destroyed them. I completely destroyed my crystal. That's what you get. Like, I'm a little bit of an airhead at the moment. Well, most moments. But that's okay. Not gonna stream for long. I'm a little bit more tired than I thought I would be, but that's okay. It's okay, we're always sometimes tired. But I still felt like I got a lot of support on YouTube lately, so I felt like I had to do something back. And again, you can do this a second time. I mean, I just rotated it. And again, it's prototype, so it's rough, and rough things don't matter as much as polished things. And again, these are glowing crystals, so when you make something like that, you want to make sure that the environment around it is also lit. Otherwise, they just feel like they stand out way too much and they don't add a lot of... They don't feel part of the environment if the entire environment isn't lit the same way. Again, this chain is really cool, but I feel like right now this chain is right on top of these crystals. So I can pick up this chain and move it somewhere, and don't mean to move the entire thing, just the chain, and I can move the chain. That's fine. I can move the chain to be somewhere different than the crystals. And what I can do is make the crystals reflect on this chain, so again, very rough. But to make sure that the presence of this chain is visible in the environment. The chain, like the presence of this crystal, is visible in the environment. Oh, and I look at this. Like, this has a lot of depth going for it. But you can see some overarching elements, like front objects, and I went a little bit more in depth on the front right here. And then interesting elements in the environment, in this case of the, and I eventually, when you look at these two, like this is supposed to be like the fountain of the sages in the game. And I moved it slightly towards the right here to make sure that it fits the rule of thirds. It's placed exactly on the grid of the rule of thirds, and I think it's one of the important elements in the game. And you can see I really tried to use shading and animation to make it stand out in the environment. And right here it's still very rough. So this was the first day, but I did try the same thing as I do right here. Get some of the shapes that you want to be reoccurring in the environment. Want to put them down. So like in the example of the crystal peak, it's mine shafts and ladders. And also conveyor belts. And oh, I'm so gonna make lasers later. I promise. There's gonna be a laser in there. I still feel like the environment might be a little bit too far in the depths, because what could be interesting if instead of like, when I look at this background, the Smith objects being all like this, I would put the layer in front of the background. Or maybe I would put the layer in front of the mid objects. Like even now I'm like thinking, okay, the environment looks like this. There are elements in the game that look differently. How can I use these elements of the game to enhance the experience? So, for example, there's usually a lot of really big crystals in the environment, and they might stick out on the midground layer as well. So, and some crystals they point. Again, I can make these crystals point in any kind of direction. I can make some more dark because it's further well, might be a little bit more. Deeper in the environment. And I look at it. Before I do anything, I feel like, does this match the vibe, the shape, the form? And I feel like no, it doesn't. It feels weird and out of place. So I remove it and I try again. Try a different shape. Trying to get the shape right. Maybe I want some crystals more. I'm like, yeah. Well, this is great. Well, I have made these shafts right here. So Right here there's an interesting place to put crystals, because I put on this front back layer, which I haven't used nearly enough. I could like make some interesting mine shafts over here. Again, rough. Put mine shafts over here. And then I go back to the crystal layer. And I put some crystals behind the mine shaft. And then I'm creating depth. Then I'm creating interesting shapes. So that's something I'm always thinking about. It's like, how do I make it interesting? How do I create shapes that look cool? And I'm gonna say it's going to be a short stream today. I'm not gonna stream for long. But I haven't really told a lot about the beginning process of my environment art before a lot, because they tend to take a lot of time for me to find the right composition, and it's also a phase where I think a lot of my art looks like garbage, sort of. Like my pieces usually take a lot of polish, so again, just like this first City of Tears map, I try to nail the vibe down first, and I try to get a good shape in there, because right now this doesn't, or like the depth doesn't look great, so I probably still want to have like some big crystals pointing out from the ground, and I like that, just to make sure like I really nail the vibe of the area. Again, rough. So I really want to make something that feels whole and complete. And maybe there's even some go to front crystals and even have some crystals sticking out from the sky above. And that's just something you have to test, see what works, and feel like, maybe this doesn't feel good. Well, then you go back to the other layer and you look, what if I draw a crystal on this layer? Does that feel good? And maybe it feels a lot better. To me it does. Like I can, and now I kind of get an idea of what I want to draw by drawing. Like, I'm like, okay, so we have this mineshaft area, and then in the middle we have these big crystals, and we can create, I have now visualized in front of myself, I'll make this mineshaft area built around this big open space with crystals in the middle. So that means that there's like huge stairs, like shafts that go around it, and then there might be like lasers shooting between the crystals in the middle. So that's kind of the way I'm going to approach it. It's like building something around this crystal cluster in the middle, like of large crystals. It's not going to be a long stream. I know I've only been streaming for like 52 minutes. But feel free to ask me any questions you have, and I might just continue on it once I'm a little bit further off stream. But I still felt like it was great to like give a bit of understanding as to how my process works in the beginning stages. Well, thanks all for coming to my stream, and I'll be talking to you all later, and I'll be streaming again soon enough. Goodbye.